Hello, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon session of Pitch Perfect. We were taking a little bit of time because one of the startups has not joined yet, but if he joins, then we will continue with him. Otherwise, I just wanted to welcome all of you to MedCity's Invest virtual program this year. I hope you're all settled in. We have some very interesting startups this afternoon. But before we launch with the pitch competition, I wanted to share a little bit about MedCity News so that folks who are not aware of the company will know a little bit more. First of all, I also wanted to make a point and thank Unity Point Health Ventures, which is sponsoring this track of health IT startups. So MedCity News was founded in late 2008. Some of you may know, my name is Arundhati Parmar, and I'm the editor-in-chief of MedCity News. I used to be a reporter for MedCity back in the day, and then I came back in 2016 to basically oversee health, the editorial and the conferences. So we are a national publication drawing nearly 2 million page views monthly. We cover biopharma, digital health, medical devices, diagnostics, as well as hospitals and payers in the context of the industry's overall transformation. We host conferences focusing on investment, population health, precision medicine, digital health, and patient engagement. We also accept outside content through our influencers program. We also have a podcast called MedCity Pivot. We launched it in the last month or so because we felt that because of the pandemic, every entity, including us as individuals, had to pivot in our personal lives and in our business lives. So we've had a few very interesting guests, and I would love it if you sent me suggestions for who you think would be wonderful to interview through our Pivot podcast. And of course, all our episodes are available on this site and in the link that I have shared here. A big thank you to all our sponsors, Unity Point Health, JP Morgan, BioEnterprise, and TriNet, without whom this event would not be possible. Also, thank you to our partner, MHIN. MHIN is a nonprofit organization comprised of 50 plus active healthcare investment firms with offices throughout Middle America. So I wanted to set sort of the contest ground rules because I know all of you are Zooming a lot these days, and each event has its own set of rules. So I wanted to clarify all our rules today. We have 5 health services startups, health IT startups that are presenting today. All the executive summaries of all the startups are available as PDFs in the group chat. If they're not available right now, they will be shortly. Each startup has a total of 10 minutes, 4 minutes to pitch, followed by a 6-minute Q&A with active investor judges. Time will be enforced pretty strictly to make sure all startups have equal time. So I will chime in when there's 1 minute left, and then I'll also chime in when the time is up. At the end of the 5 presentations, we'll do a quick online poll to determine an audience favorite from today's track. Winners will be announced next Monday on medcitynews.com. So let's meet our judges. First, we have Austin Duke, Venture Associate from Unity Point Health Ventures. We have Christine Brocato, System VP Strategic Innovation from Common Spirit Health. And then we have Robert Garber, Partner from Seven Wire Ventures. Austin Duke currently serves as Venture Associate at Unity Point Health Ventures, where he helps lead all investment activities, including sourcing, diligence, execution, and post-investment support. Austin brings more than 10 years of biomedical research and development experience, along with a deep understanding of the opportunities and challenges presented to startup companies. Prior to joining Unity Point Health, Austin served as Chief Science Officer at Nexion Med Systems. Next, we have Christine Brocato. Christine Brocato is a System VP of Strategic Innovation at Common Spirit Health, the parent company of Dignity Health and Catholic Health Initiatives. In close partnership with operational leaders, Christine co-leads innovation projects related to care automation, transportation, addressing social determinants, mental health, and ambulatory care transformation. Christine is passionate about helping vulnerable and Medicaid populations receive access to patient-centered care and access to social resources that prevent health disparities. She has more than 15 years of healthcare management experience. And last but not least, we have Robert. Robert Garber is currently a partner at Seven Wire Ventures, where he focuses on investments in digital healthcare and technology-enabled services that empower consumers to be better stewards of their health in today's changing healthcare ecosystem. Robert has over 25 years of experience investing in, advising, and operating early-stage healthcare and technology companies. Before joining Seven Wire Ventures, Robert served as managing director of Stratus Ventures and KB Partners, where he led investments in early stage healthcare and technology companies. Welcome to all of you judges. Let's meet our pitch perfect finalists. We have Luma Health, PrefTech, HealthNote, Innovative Supply Solutions, and eHealthNow. So first we'll talk about Luma Health, designed to modernize access, automate patient-provider communications, and help providers grow their business. Luma Health is the digital health partner that providers require and turn to optimize health outcomes and remain competitive in today's consumerized environment. 100,000 providers use Luma Health's bot-powered, mobile-first, cloud-based platform to engage with more than 9 million patients. Co-founder and CEO Adnan Iqbal will be presenting first. Take it away, Adnan.
Thanks for that, Dee. I'm gonna grab the screen here from you if that's okay. All right, can you guys see my screen?
We can, but if you want to hit that view slideshow option, then we could see the entire screen. And I haven't started your time yet, so you're cool.
All right, bear with me, guys. All right, good?
Yes, perfect, go ahead.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the kind introduction. So Adnan Iqbal, one of the founders and the CEO here at Luma Health. Apologies for the shag. This is 4.5 months of sheltering in place here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Excited to spend time with all of you here. Really, our core focus at Luma Health is to tackle one of the greatest challenges in healthcare, which is helping get a patient the right care with the right doctor quickly. And then equally important, make sure that patient returns for care and keeps coming back for care across their own unique healthcare journey. And so, this is the reality for patients and health systems across the country, something you all are familiar with. And that's every year there's a little over 1.4 billion ambulatory or office-based appointments scheduled. Of those, 400 million appointments never happen. And that's really all due to breakdowns of communication at any given point along that patient journey. And that, of course, results in over $150 billion in economic loss, one, a function of lost revenue from missed appointments, and then, of course, the costs associated with missed treatment opportunities. And really, where our focus is something we experience firsthand, me as a patient, and Dr. Tashfeen Akram, who's one of our founders and our chief medical officer, he experienced as a provider. And very simply, the initial pain point was patients are waiting weeks to months to be able to get to care in the outpatient setting, right? The average wait time for a patient in the US is 2.5 to 12 weeks to be able to get to care, depending on what type of care they need, what part of the country they live in. The average wait time for a primary care appointment these days is a little over 24 days. So it's hard enough to get in and access care. And for those patients who do get into care, most patients don't leave with any real follow-up, right? They're getting a set of photocopies or handouts. And then for those patients who need to get to a higher level of care, to see a specialist, transition from an ED to a physician visit, less than half of patients actually can complete that. And that's not because the patient's not trying. It's not because the clinic or the hospital health system doesn't want to see the patient. It's all due to breakdowns of communication that prevent that connection from happening. And so that's really our focus. Is we find that patients and their loved ones today really have to be their own patient success champion, right? They have to navigate these set of complex interactions to be able to get to the care they need, and of course to return for care and seek guidance as they need. And that's really our core focus at Luma Health, is to be the patient engagement platform, right? The way for healthcare clinics, hospitals, and health systems to own and automate this entire patient journey. Real-time, automated, text first, and intelligent, right? These are bots having conversations with the patient before, during, between, and after an appointment. The goal being, one, get a patient into care as quickly as possible, making sure they're well prepared so they can complete their care. Two, and equally important, make sure the patient returns for care and keeps coming back for care. And three, of course, care doesn't end just because you have the four walls of the clinic. Care needs to continue. How do you effectively guide a patient in between and after visits? And then most importantly, how do you nudge them to reactivate at the right time to get in for the care they need? So the breadth of touch points along the entire patient journey, combined with the clinical depth, right? The ability to have real-time secure clinical conversation with the patient around their specific disease, their diagnoses, their care plan. And really it's that combination of breadth and depth that allows us to partner with clinics, hospitals, and health systems. We work with a little over 400 systems across the country to really harmonize that entire patient experience, right? In their words, to deliver a seamless digital front door that doesn't just focus on new patient acquisition, but really focuses on nurturing, acquiring, retaining, and guiding patients along that continuum. The power, of course, is the simplicity of the patient experience, right? It's text first, 20 languages out of the box, really meant to be a solution for 100% of Americans, not just 10 or 20% of Americans. No app, no download, no portal, no login, no friction. Equally important is simplicity of the super user experience, right? The care teams, the coordinators, the schedulers, what have you. Meant to be 0 to no click simple. But underneath it, you really want to be able to handle and allow for nth level customizations, the ability to customize rules, workflows, cadences, contents, etc., by appointment type, diagnosis, location, provider, facility, urgency, etc. And again, that's the power that allows for that completely harmonized patient journey and patient experience.
Time's up.
All right.
Austin, why don't you start with the first question, then we'll go to Christine and then to Robert.
Sure, thanks, Adnan. That was great. A lot there that I really like. I have to imagine, given the breadth of what you're doing and the various competencies of health systems along their sort of digital care and transformation journey, that you're showing up at some that have really nothing in the space and others that may have many different point solutions. What's your experience been in coming to these customers and offering something so broad where you may need to replace existing infrastructure?
Yeah, no, great question. And we see all flavors of that. And, first and foremost, it's really to understand what that specific health system's priorities are, right? What are their most impactful areas looking to solve? And if it's simply we want to modernize patient communication, i.e. move away from a legacy reminder solution like a Televox or a Teleminder or something, and really now up level to dynamic conversations, clinically competent, culturally competent, multilingual, deep integration with the core EHR, then that's where we start. And those, there's a significant wave of clinics, hospital health systems in the country that are very much at that. And I think that the pandemic has really accelerated their desire to make that leap to modernize communication. And then you have those systems who've tried portals, right? They tried portals 5 years ago. They either leveraged their MyChart app or built their own app, a couple of years ago. And their challenge really has been they have not been able to really move the needle in terms of access, and they're still supporting 6 to 8 different point solutions, right? Something that's a reminder solution or a referral solution, a post-appointment solution. And what they've really stepped back and said is, hey, we need something that is seamless, that harmonizes all those touch points, because often they're not connected. They often may give the patient conflicting information. We want deep connectivity with our core EHR. And then of course, we want to also connect to the other core platforms that we use, be it the contact center, be it a CRM, et cetera. I think that's the power is we, of course, don't just integrate with Epic, Cerner, and Meditech, but 70 other EHR and PM systems. So we have that deep plumbing in place, and we can really serve as that middleware to provide true visibility to a patient across EHR, across provider network, and of course, across health plan.
Great, let's go to Christine.
Great, thanks, Anand. I really believe that this type of technology will be table stakes in healthcare very quickly. And with that, I think that there's a good amount of players really thinking about the space. We see a lot of kind of bot-based technology. Mm-hmm. So how is Luma different?
Sure.
What is kind of your distinguishing, bent on the offering, and where will your product go in the future? Are you thinking about real-time eligibility, collections? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Sure. So you're right. I mean, it's a noisy space. There's a lot of bot-enabled technology out there. And I think one of the key differentiating factors is you have to have the depth of EHR integration, not just be limited to a schedule or a practice management module, but to actually have clinically relevant information to be able to guide a patient effectively, and to be able to capture patient-generated response or data and put it back into the right place in the EHR for there to be true value. So I think you have 101 different messaging and scheduling companies. They often lack clinical depth. On the other side, you have companies like a Twistle, a GetWell, who have deep clinical intelligence, but of course can't close the loop in terms of getting patients access, right? The ability to one-click schedule, and then to do all the things you mentioned, to be able to help a patient capture the mobile patient intake, to do eligibility, if they're having a telehealth visit, to provide them the right education for them to understand what they need to do, what their phone needs to do, et cetera. So that's where you have all these point solutions today, and it's noisy, but folks are, I think, really stepping back and saying, I need to connect this and to really have a true digital front door strategy. So near term, I guess, moat is the depth of our EHR integration. And then longer term, it's, we started off a set of automated communication tools. We're now an end-to-end patient journey management platform. And really what we hope to be is the patient relationship management platform. What I mean by that is, we now have enough data, right? We have 16 million unique patients on the platform. We really understand patients as a customer, right? We can understand a patient's preferred channel, text, emails, voice, what time of day they're responsive, what time they like to show up. And then we can actually predict with decent accuracy how likely it is to show up for care. And if they show up, how likely it is that they're going to come back for their care and stick to their care plan. And that, of course, allows you to go from a one-size-fits-all approach to really be able to start tailoring your outreach to specific patient populations and to then predict where do they stay green, where do they become yellow, and where are they at risk of becoming red, and how does Luma intervene automatically, and in some cases, of course, then up level to a more human type of interaction if needed.
Great. Let's go to Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Adnan. Can you talk a little bit about outcomes or KPIs, or how do you measure success? And when you think about, it sounds very provider-centric, and I'm curious as sort of from the consumer's perspective, does this just make my life easier when it comes to scheduling and interacting, or is there something more empowering than that? So maybe two sides of the question.
Sure. So by design, patients don't know who Luma is, right? They're having a very personalized communication directly with their care team. Our clients, partners, of course, are the clinics, hospitals, health systems. But the key metrics we track from a health system side is, of course, top line revenue generation, right? And that's all a function of increased capacitization. How many patients were we able to help get in? How many patients were we able to help retain and effectively guide, of course? And then from a patient standpoint, it's really a function of engagement, right? We see across the country, across age group, demographic, socioeconomic status, a 60% plus response rate. In major metros, as high as 85%. And you cannot match that with the contact center, with an app, with a portal, with kind of first generation messaging companies like a Well or a Televox. But really you want to be able to have that conversational NLP, active learning based conversation with the patient that of course is multilingual as well. And so that's where the patient aspect of it is incredibly simple to use, and patients can engage with it not just for scheduling, but for their patient education, for bill pay, for being able to ask questions, to be able to launch a telehealth visit, to do all the things that today you often have to ultimately get on the phone or log into some clunky portal. You're not able to do that very simply over a channel that you're incredibly used to, and you feel comfortable. You can message a patient 5-6 times in a day over text and they're not annoyed. If you call them more than twice, they're going to voicemail anyway. And if you email them more than twice, they're looking for the unsubscribe button.
Time's up. Thank you so much, Adnan. We'll
of course, thanks, guys.
On with the next startup. So PrefTech is the digital healthcare company that is revolutionizing preference card management. PrefTech's initial product offering, PrefTech OR, is a software as a service solution that provides the decision and analytics and workflow governance necessary to correct, maintain, and optimize supply utilization within the perioperative suite. Matt Bohm, President and CEO, will present next. Take it away, Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Bohm, and I am the CEO of PrefTech, and I'm not sharing my screen yet. There we go. How's that? All right. I'm the CEO of PrefTech. Thank you so much for having me. All right. PrefTech is a software and data analytics company that is focused on leading the healthcare industry's effort to finally fix the surgical preference card. Our product history dates back to 2014 when a major 16 hospital IDN discovered that their EMR provider, as well as various consulting solutions in the space, just were not providing a durable fix to cleaning and maintaining their preference cards. And so they partnered with a software boutique in the area to build a cloud-based solution to address the problem. And the success there inspired a group of prominent venture capitalists led by Dave Rue of Silver Lake, to sponsor a carve-out transaction, which we completed in 2018, which led to what is today PrefTech. The pain point associated with preference cards gets articulated to me, at least in many different ways, but as we see it, the problem with preference cards is one of data management, workflow management, and really addressing a time and satisfaction issue that that the nursing staff especially deal with. But it has ripple effects to all sorts of other places in the hospital. As you may know, a typical hospital has their cost and revenue driven out of the perioperative services department, and the consumption of supplies and the use of devices and supplies in the operating room tends to be governed by this pesky thing called a preference card. In our experience, those preference cards tend to be 40 to 50% inaccurate if they're left unmanaged, and our observation as well as studies suggest that roughly 10% of the items that are needlessly brought into an operating room get immediately disposed of following a procedure. So you end up with a tremendous amount of waste. This creates a lot of headache for supply chain, but it also results in frustrated surgeons, lower quality outcomes for patients, and really irritated nursing staff that have to deal with the fix associated with these preference cards. What we're doing is we're targeting an issue, the core issue, which we see as stranded data related to the preference cards, disparate data sets scattered throughout the hospital at high volume, lots of data, poor process governance, as well as the tendency for best practices and physician preferences to change over time, which results in card atrophy. Inaccurate preference cards leads to inaccurately supplied cases. So too many supplies, too few supplies, incorrect supplies. And you can imagine all the headaches that emanate from that. We see this as roughly a $45 billion problem in the US alone every year. So we're a middleware application that sits in between the EMR and the ERP system. At our core, we've got a sophisticated proprietary decision engine that guides the user community through the fixes to the problems. And then we're focused on eliminating waste as well as eliminating needless clinical variation. We've got a really incredible team at the heart of this, which in the interest of time, I will skirt past. All right, we've been in market for about a year now with an early version of the product. 2019, however, was a material upgrade to that and the commercialization of that product. 2020 is kind of our rollout year. We are installed in various locations, and we're seeing incredible successes. So we've got just two highlighted here. These are kind of medium-sized 15 to 25 OR facilities where we're saving material amounts of money. And we've got supply chain staff, clinicians, and physicians that are singing our praises because we've instilled a new level of trust in the preference cards, and we've just made nursing staff their lives so much easier.
Time's up. Let's go to Christine first.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Great presentation. I think anyone who works in the hospital environment knows that preference cards are a big pain in the butt. So this is a real problem. It's also a niche problem. So how do you plan to acquire customers? Are you going to be selling directly to surgical suites, or is one of many technologies that they need, or are you going to be going through some type of other distribution channel?
So where we've started and where we are today is selling directly, in large part because we've been in this experimentation mode around the business model, the pricing model, and wanting to really manage carefully the customer experience with the first couple of accounts. However, largely given I should say the situation has been accentuated by COVID, where we believe we need a big strategic player to partner with. And we've identified a couple who are excited about doing that, conversations which began with, hey, are you guys interested in selling? But pivoted to, we'd like to partner with you in other ways. where from our side, we're looking for channel partnerships to accelerate market penetration, as well as integration partnerships, at least on the EMR side. Another big player that has, big player community that has become fertile ground for strategic partnership conversations has been with GPOs.
Yeah, good strategy.
Let's go to Robert.
Thanks, Matt. Can you talk a little bit more about pricing? You mentioned that that's some of the trials that you're working on right now, but based on those two examples you put up, there clearly is potential for some meaningful savings. I'm just curious, how do you get proper credit for the value you're creating at those types of numbers?
Right, that's a really good question, and something that we continue to wrestle with. So, in this form, I don't want to get into too many specifics, but I will say that our contracting has looked a little bit differently everywhere we've closed a deal. We're largely selling this on a per operating room basis and a recurring subscription basis. However, given the fact that, to use an anecdote, the value of, say, a cleaning service for your home is going to be dramatically affected by whether or not you're a neat freak or a hoarder, right? So when we go in, the quality of the data is going to be dirty because it's always dirty, but it varies dramatically by site. We've put forward some contingency type offers, some revenue share type agreements that the perioperative services teams have loved and we've been willing to move forward on, but inevitably they get bogged down in legal. And so we've shortcutted the process and inevitably circled back around to some sort of licensing costs on a per operating room basis. However, we're still open and actually in current discussions with some providers who are interested in that sort of thing. So we're playing in that space and trying to figure out ways that that while going at risk, we can capture more of the upside.
Let's go to Austin.
So I'm going to cheat and ask a bit of a two-part question here. Who is the primary user of the software? And then is there anybody in the chain of folks that are engaging with Pref cards that are going to have to have a behavior change and may or may not be incentivized to do so, given they've been operating in a certain way for a long time?
Yeah. So typically our core customer is whoever owns the P&L for the operating room, the head of perioperative services or an OR director at a hospital level. And getting the nursing staff, the nurse management staff involved in the tool is critical because they tend to be the subject matter experts regarding the tool. But part of the value proposition of what we're doing is we're providing a really easy platform for creating collaboration between departments. I've talked to so many surgeons who've never seen their preference cards. I've talked to a lot of supply chain leaders who are trying to make purchasing decisions, but then don't have any visibility in terms of how decisions at a higher level are manifesting themselves at a preference card level. So they want to be involved too. And then value analysis wants to be brought in. So we actually, this product was originally inspired by supply chain. Our core user community, however, tends to be nurse managers. But at the end of the day, we're adding features that are really focused on bringing in new parts of that whole community that I've described. And one of the big efforts in the last 4 to 5 months in terms of development has been trying to elevate the value proposition specifically for the C-suite, because the C-suite has a desire to see certain pieces of this. We want the CFO logging into our platform occasionally to look at what's happening. We want the COO logging in and seeing what's happening. And so we've found ways to elevate that value proposition for them, and we're working to continue accentuating that. But the core user community remains nurse managers. In terms of change, there's a little bit of change that is occurring in the life of the nurses, but it's not dramatic. They're being yelled at regularly by surgeons to change preference cards, and they're being asked by leaders to participate in occasional kind of systematic cleanup efforts that are kind of orchestrated by outside consulting firms. So they're making changes, but what they're making changes to the cards. The kind of the professional lifestyle change that we're asking of them is that rather than living this reactive kind of ad hoc life of making one-off changes here and there because somebody's barking about it, to use our platform to kind of continuously monitor and maintain. And our promise to them is that we're going to make that as painless as possible. So we provide a really user-friendly experience for them to stay on top of that.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Matt. We'll move forward to our next startup, which is HealthNote. HealthNote auto-documents medical notes. It captures symptoms, medication, demographics, and signatures from the company's chatbot. For patients, there's no app to download, no patient portal to sign into. The company uses FHIR, HL7, and APIs to enter info that is gathered into EMR accurately and into the required structured data fields. When physicians open a patient's chart, they find that 80% charting is complete. Josh Reicher, CEO and founder, will be presenting next. Take it away, Josh.
Thanks very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. So I had just sat down with one of my patients, Mary, and as soon as we did, she opens a plastic bag and dumps a pile of medications on my desk and says, "I need a few refills." And I said, "Okay, let's do one thing at a time. When was the last time you saw your doctor?" And before I could finish my sentence, she said, "Hold on. Let me call my daughter." She hands me her phone and says, "She'll talk to you and tell you everything." And it took a whole 15 minutes before we finished. Now imagine if we could have gathered all this information before Mary even arrived. Physicians around the country spend an extraordinary amount of time gathering information from their patients. They spend half of their day on the EMR and even more time doing work after work. Physicians are overwhelmed with the wave of data, resulting in multiple unintended downstream effects, causing patient frustration and physician burnout. My name is Dr. Joshua Reicher, and I'm CEO and co-founder of HealthNote. And as a primary care provider, I left practice to solve this very problem. Today's solutions have not been good enough. Hospitals and clinics struggle to get even 10% of their patients to give any information before their visit starts. And over 500 million hours are spent by providers on this very problem. And just in case you were wondering, this is enough time to go back and forth to Mars more than 45,000 times. And so our mission is to empower patients to partake in their own health record and enable more accurate diagnosis, treatment, and efficiency of care, and of course, a better experience. So when we set out to create HealthNote, we tested and iterated with hundreds of older patients to make sure it was easy to use for everyone. We start the conversation before a visit by sending an SMS with a secure link. There's no app to download, no sign-ins. We focus on accessibility, and of course, we speak your patient's language. We ask all of the questions a physician or nurse would ask and integrate all of that data into structured data fields in the record system. Here's what a note looks like pre-visit planning. It's just headings. The usual pre-visit planning shows some basic data. But with HealthNote, 80+% of a physician's note is complete before the patient even arrives. And we do this because when a physician is typing, patients are receiving less than optimal care. Our business model is simple. We charge clinics and hospitals per provider per month or per patient encounter. And we know this is a huge market with over 1 billion outpatient visits every year in the US. There's no better time than now. COVID-19 has accelerated the pace of change. There's a burning need to automate, and CMS's new payment models require better communication and better data to optimize outcomes for value-based care. We started in June 2018, and since then we've grown to more than 50 locations and have helped see over 100,000 patient visits at amazing institutions around the country. We have 100% of our pilots turn into contract, 0 churn, and 80 to 100% patient engagement. We've put together an amazing group of clinicians, engineers, and designers to actually make this technology a reality. because we believe technology without humanity breaks down what makes a human physician worthwhile. And old tools broke our systems, and we need new ones to restore it. And so with HealthNote, now your doctor can actually see you. Thanks.
Great. Let's go to Robert for the first question.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit more about use cases? Obviously, sort of pre-visit history gathering is valuable and needed, but I'm just curious, sort of when you think about all the different touch points, both virtual and in office, sort of, you know, how does this really get integrated into the workflow in a way which is a little bit more universal than the experience that you just demonstrated?
Yeah, so we're completely integrated into the workflow. Providers are paying as much for HealthNote as they are for their EMR. We're not just involved in the first visit, we're involved in every subsequent visit. And so we're really involved in all of those touch points. Now, when folks have text messaging back and forth, that assumes that a provider group actually has the capacity to answer every single question a patient has. And most of the time they don't. And they put these sort of question answerings around a visit. And so we know what kind of visit a patient is coming in for, whether it's a new visit, a follow-up visit, a pre-surgical, a post-surgical, et cetera. And we're doing this in 12 different specialties. So we're really completely integrated in their workflow. And everyone from the front desk to the physician is using HealthNote. Does that answer your question?
Let's go to Austin next.
Thanks, Josh.
Sure.
You know, you have really impressive patient engagement numbers. So can you talk just a little bit more about how you're defining patient engagement, because it's going to be critical to really understanding the value of HealthNote, and then, you know, maybe how that's evolved over time. I imagine you have iterated your UI and UX to drive those numbers up.
There's two main pieces here. One is the UI UX, so making it extremely easy for patients to use. But the second part is partnering with the institutions we work with. So when I say 80 to 100%, it really depends on the group we're working with, first-time visits, follow-up visits, et cetera. With several of our groups, we actually do have 100%. And the reason is the providers find this so valuable that we're getting 80% of patients to fill this out before they show up. Now, the other 20% we're capturing because they're doing it on an iPad when they show up in the office. And if it's telemedicine, they'll have someone else help fill out that information. So for example, if the front desk person who's getting paid somewhere between $12 and $20 an hour helps someone fill out, let's say you have an 80-year-old person, or 90-year-old person, they couldn't fill this out, right? It's still more worthwhile to have the front desk person help them answer all of these questions than have someone do it on a piece of paper, transcribe it into the record system, have the nurse ask the same questions, and then the physician do the same thing. You've probably experienced the case where you fill out information, you show up to the physician, and the first question the physician asks you is, what brings you in today? Because they didn't read any of that information, it wasn't relevant, and it didn't go into the right place. So it's so valuable to them that they ensure that 100% of patients are filling this out before a physician is seen. It's part of the protocol and workflow.
Great, let's go to Christine.
Great. Josh, I was wondering if you could talk about two things, which is quality control. So person fills something out and they're describing, you know, a headache, or maybe they're using, you know, some terminology. So how do you, what is the mechanism to ensure that that is transcribed accurately? And then second, it sounds like this product is really focused and built some good algorithms on the first part of the visit, so the visit prep. How would you articulate your roadmap? Is it, you know, also going into during the visit, post-visit? How do you see, you know, your product line being built out?
So right now we're very much focused on the pre-visit aspect. There's lots of companies who are trying to listen to a patient-physician interaction during the visit. What we're finding is the main value, the biggest piece, is actually before the visit actually happens, right? And reminding me of your first question.
Quality control.
Yeah, so quality control is we're not taking place of a doctor's visit. The way the physicians think about this is we are making a visit confirmatory instead of exploratory. So what that means is you as the patient get to think about things before you show up. So the goal is that I regurgitate that information. So if I said, Christine, I understand that you're coming in with a headache. You've been having it for 4 days. You started Advil. It didn't work. Is that right? Is that where we're at? And you say, yeah, that's exactly what's happened, which is very different than, let me think about what happened 2 days ago, et cetera. And so that period of time is extraordinarily long, especially for folks who are 65 and above, which is half of the population in the US. So if you enable folks to prepare for that, that's how that happens. So the providers are looking at this information and it goes into an unsigned status. So they are very much playing a full role in them writing their own notes, but they're looking at it and reviewing, which is very much what they're used to in their workflow, because normally during training, you're having medical students, residents, et cetera, do exactly this and then show it to a provider. So it's essentially part of exactly what they've done since training from the very beginning.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much. And we'll continue on. Our next startup is Innovative Supply Solutions. And I apologize, I feel like I've written something wrong at the top. So I'm just going to go straight to Phil, who will take and present. I apologize, Phil, I have a wrong description up here. But Phil Heifetz, Chief Business Officer, will be presenting next. And once the Q&A begins, he will be joined by the company CEO, Adam Warren. So please take it away, Phil.
Okay, and let me get my screen up. Hopefully, is everyone seeing that?
Not yet.
Aha. Okay, try that again. Oops, okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Okay, you can hear me? All right, so thank you, Armandati. If I can just take an extra second here, then I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Apologize that didn't make it onto the slide, but we are a company in the clinical trial supply space. We're a software technology company. My name is Phil Heifetz, Chief Business Officer, and yes, also on the phone today is Adam Warren, our founder and CEO. If I can get that to work, there we go. So ISS, we're a company that's really poised for growth. We've got a strong team. We've got pharma and tech folks on board. We are currently at $1 million+ in revenues, and about 80% of that, a little more than that, is recurring. Our clients span the realm across biotech, pharma, and even into CROs. And we're on a path to achieve potentially $50+ million in the next 3 to 5 years. And we see multiple opportunities to reach a sale or exit. This is our customer. So this is a market that's ripe for disruption, and we sell, again, to pharmaceutical biotech companies. And within those companies, the clinical supplies manager is often our landing point. And their job is to gather up information from across the organization to calculate how much drug is needed and make sure that the right drug is at the right place at the right time, every time, so that no patient ever misses a dose and you minimize waste, cost, and time. But the tools they have today just don't cut it. So whether you're talking about tools like SAP or Oracle, these big, bulky enterprise resource planning tools, they don't have the ability to do scenario planning and analysis, that real flexibility that you need. So those again, really don't work. Excel and spreadsheets are cumbersome, time-consuming, and error-prone, which again is a real problem in a regulated industry like pharmaceuticals. And there are competitive, expensive legacy systems out there, but again, our customers are not really happy with what's available on the market today. So despite the fact that they're spending about $1 billion a year in total on tools and time to manage clinical supplies, they end up having to make about double that, the amount they actually need, because they don't really know how much they need, and then about half of that gets thrown in the trash at the end of a study. So we've got a better way to do this. So there is software out there for clinical trials that tends, and most of that, if not all of it, is focused on the patient or patient data. We do this differently. We're the first clinical trial operations technology that was built from a supply chain perspective. And that gives us certain benefits in terms of accuracy, speed and ease of use that are really critical. And the way we do this is by bringing together in the cloud a system that includes that ERP functionality, the forecasting and simulation part, and then the actual executing the trial. We pull that all together into one integrated program. And then the user can take the inputs from across the organization, feeds that in, can do their analysis on the fly. They can do very quick side-by-side comparisons of different scenarios and inputs. And out the other side comes a very highly predictive view of the future, a forecast upon which they can build that optimized clinical supply plan. And because those forecasts are so accurate, the plans end up being about within 10% of what actually happens. So again, it's very accurate and gives you a lot of power in decision-making. Because of that, we've gotten some great traction. So we are a software as a service company, so we're on a subscription model, and we've increased our revenue over time. One of our biggest customers, or a customer, is a CRO, one of the top 5 CROs. And we just signed 3 contracts in the last 30 days. Those contracts overall range from about 30,000 to 50,000 up to 200 or more. And the average contract in 2020 was 130,000. So why ISS? We have the team experience across the industry. We're solving a big problem in the pharmaceuticals industry, and it's $1 billion spend and growing. And we've demonstrated our ability to get traction in the market, seeing again multiple opportunities to achieve that 50+ million in the next 3 to 5 years. And we can do this through expanding into areas like cell and gene therapy, direct-to-patient, virtual trials, and even into commercial. And with that, I will take questions.
Perfect. We will start with Robert.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Can you talk a little bit about measurement? And so when you think about ROI and effectiveness of sort of matching supply and demand, sort of where do you start? Where's the goal? Where's the law of diminishing returns? What's the expectation of the client? And how does that compare to sort of industry norms?
Sure. So the value that the clients get is really in the area of saving time and saving money. So we've seen studies in cases where they've spent and wasted $10 million by buying a very expensive drugs that they just didn't need at the end of the day in the study. So there's real direct cost savings that can be had by understanding ahead of time what your actual needs are. And then just in terms of time, we have several companies we know of who are using things like Excel again. And I'm sure you all know the amount of time that is wasted and required to build just a single model. And then the clinical team can come in a day later and tell you that they're completely changing the design of the study, which basically you have to throw away your entire Excel model and start over. We make that super easy. It's a configurable system where it's just a matter of a few clicks to change that around to get it the way to match what the new information is.
Let's go to Austin.
Are you finding that with your new customers that you are coming in the middle of a trial after they realize they have a problem? Or are you able to sell the value and the ROI prospectively ahead of the trial?
Yeah, I think so really early on, it was the case of being called in to do saves, which is very challenging. And now we're at a point now where we're being called in ahead of time. So we can get into some more detail on kind of how we've designed our sales process and the product. But essentially it builds up. So a customer will come in at a fairly low price point on an earlier stage of that overall platform, and we'll move them up over time. And we use our internal team, we have customers, success folks. So there's a lot of different ways that we can keep people moving along that trajectory.
Let's go to Christine.
Yeah, really great presentation. I was just thinking, given, you know, the fact that you're forming these trusted relationships with your customers, what has been their response from the suppliers? Is there a revenue opportunity going, you know, more upstream as well? Or how has the drug supplier kind of reacted to you being kind of now in the middle of that?
So in our case, again, we're selling directly to these would be the manufacturers of the drugs, of pharmaceutical companies. So, you know, pick your biotech or pharma company out there.
Mm-hmm.
So upstream of that would be their suppliers. We don't really need to or wouldn't necessarily want to interact so much, although we do interact with some of their third-party vendors. So a great example, we have a partner of ours is one of the major packaging companies, a company called PCI, and they handle thousands of studies. And so again, we have some direct ties to them in terms of our data flow and our ability to work with them very closely. So that's a big advantage to our clients, to know that we work closely with one of the packaging companies that's out there that is often a vendor of theirs. Does that help? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was wondering because you accumulate some interesting data. So who might want to be purchasing that from you?
Okay, yeah, data is a whole nother question. So we have to be very careful. So we do not collect any patient data, and we're very careful about that. We're outside of HIPAA. We don't collect any of that. However, what we do understand is utilization of drug in clinical trials. And we learn a lot about things like enrollment patterns at different sites. And so, yeah, there is some interesting data that can come out of this.
Yeah.
We have about a minute left. So if another judge has a question, please feel free. Okay, I guess you stumped the judges, Phil.
I have a quick question.
Thank you very much.
very much.
Again, I apologize for not having an updated slide. We'll continue on with.
There was one more question.
Yeah, I have a quick question. If that's okay. What are the main costs for your business? I mean, what are you paying for third-party integrations to get some of the data for the supply chain, or is it?
No.
So that go ahead, Adam.
Most of our costs is actually in people and headcount. So we moved all of our development work in-house. It made it much more cost-effective for us, but it also made us a lot faster in response to continuing to develop the application. That's the one thing that I'm extremely passionate about, is we're always going to be developing this software. There's always going to be new features, new ways of doing things that we can expand our reach and add multiple touch points throughout the organization, making it extremely sticky. But yeah, most of our expenses are solely in people.
Great, thank you very much for that. Let's continue on. So our last presenter is from eHealthNow. eHealthNow is the first platform that exclusively focuses on optimizing the management plans for cancer patients in China. From initial virtual tumor board joint consultations, treatment delivery to follow-up care, the company brings world-class cancer care to Chinese cancer patients. It has a network of more than 800 oncologists, hematologists in the US, working with 5 top academic institutions, a HIPAA-compliant EHR platform, patented machine learning technology, among other strengths. Ram Prasad Mudalvasala, CTO, co-founder, will be our last presenter. Ram, go ahead.
Thanks, Arun. Perfect. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's staying safe during these turbulent times. My name is Ram. I'm one of the co-founder of eHealthNow. I lead US and tech operations. So as all of you guys know, cancer is a tough diagnosis anywhere in the world. And it's especially tough in the developing nations, particularly in China. China consists of almost 1/3 of the world's cancer population. And the unfortunate fact is the average survival rate in China is less than 30%, where it's compared to 70% in the United States. with the same survival rate as US, in the last 5 years, we could have saved probably 16 million cancer lives in China. And so clearly there's a huge unmet need with very big market. There are a lot of business models which try to address this particular problem, particularly medical tourism, medical second opinion, and international hospitals. But either they're not scalable, or they're too expensive, or they lack the quality. So we have created a unique solution to address this particular problem using fourfold. First, we have partnered with top 25 hospitals in China to establish US-China teleconsultation centers within the hospital. And the second thing, we secured partnership with only hospital in China which can legally deliver US FDA therapies. And third thing, we have formed a strong 68 cancer hospital delivery local cancer hospital delivery network in China to do the follow-up care. And finally, we have our own in-house proprietary cloud-based EHR system to seamlessly deliver the entire solution. So by using a solution, patients were able to receive US standard of quality care much faster and at much affordable cost. We are currently doing pilot with 4 academic institutions, including Penn Medicine, UCSF, UCLA, and NYP. And our oncology network is over 1,000, who all come from top 10 hospitals. In China, as I mentioned, we partner with top 25 hospitals, which are, to give the context, MD Anderson or John Hopkins version of in China. Since 2019, which is last year, we have partnered with top 12 insurance companies in China. They're offering our services to their customers, which cover over 190 million people. When we started this, we didn't have the technology which we needed. So we created our own in-house cloud-based EHR system, which seamlessly translates between Mandarin to English. We make money through 2 ways. First, customer pay, self-paid, it's out of pocket for their consultation or for the treatment. And then there is insurance model, which is per member per year premium, which insurance pays to us. Since the launch in 2017, we gained decent traction. We have did little over $1 million in revenue. We have treated over 700 patients, and we have been featured at numerous places. And currently we are doing our Series A. But the most important fact is the impact we are making on the patients. Patients love us because for the first time they have access to world-class cancer care. Chinese physicians in China, they like us because now they have access to US oncology, not only US oncologists, but to the research as well. And for US oncologists, they have access to diverse patient population. Our record of success is mainly due to our management team. Kelly Shu, who is a Wharton MBA and previously led a $1 billion Disney venture. She leads a China operation. I take care of US operation and the tech. Dr. Vinay Kumar, he helps expand our clinical network in the United States. And a board of advice also come from pharmacies and top hospitals. Happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Let's start with Austin this time.
Thanks, Ram. How are you measuring success? So how are you being evaluated by the insurers or the folks that are paying for this service over time?
For insurance particularly, we just started just quite recently, like August of 2019. So we are still in the process of doing pilot. When I say 190 million lives, they haven't given the entire 190 million lives to us. It's basically that the average pilot is somewhere between 30 to 50,000 users for all of this insurance contract. And so at the end of the pilot, they are looking to measure what is the utilization rate. The agreed utilization rate is somewhere around 0.3%. If they meet that particular utilization rate, then they're going to renew with much larger volumes. And just to give you more context, in China particularly, the insurance is still at very early stages, and 15% of all the premiums which this users pay, that goes for oncology. So oncology is one of the biggest thing. So because there's this insurance companies are mushrooming in China, and they're trying to attract this new users, this service actually helps them onboard more and more users and to retain the existing users.
Let's go to Christine next.
Great presentation. I'm not very familiar with the regulatory environment in China as it relates to healthcare. Can you talk about what you see as the biggest regulatory risks in providing this service, and how has your company mitigated against those risks?
There are, I think, three things. First thing is, obviously, when it comes to the medical data, a lot of these countries has this cross-border transfer of medical data. So we ensured that all of our servers and everything is being hosted in China. Even AWS doesn't have their own presence. They partnered with like CNET. So we ensured like all of the servers and all of the services are completely hosted in China, and the doctors in US, they access the data through servers in China particularly. That's the first. And we ensure our platform is completely HIPAA compliant, even though China doesn't mandate any, they have their own internal policies, but we ensure that we are following all the HIPAA standard for a data platform. And the second thing, I think with the other business models which I've mentioned earlier, in most of them, US physicians actually take the legal liability risk. But in our case, US physicians doesn't take any kind of liability risk. They're purely suggesting, recommending their advice as a second opinion. So they don't have any kind of legal risk. It's completely up to the Chinese patient or the Chinese hospital if they want to implement it or not. And when I mentioned earlier regarding accessing to the US FDA therapies, it's in the Hainan pilot zone. It's called Hainan Super Specialty Hospital. That's the only zone which can legally deliver this US FDA therapies. So we secured partnership with that particular hospital. So that's the only hospital which provides this US FDA therapies.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Robert next.
Thanks, Ram. Two questions. One, just following up on what you were just saying, what percentage of the care suggestions from the second opinion are not available in China? And what happens? I saw in your deck that some portion of people that need to come to the U.S. to get treatment. Is that expected to be material, or is that just sort of the exception to the norm?
Sure. I think there were two parts to your question. First thing is how many of the first thing is like how many of these cases usually need a US FDA therapist, or the treatments are already available in China. So it's close to what, with our experience, it's close to like 10 to 12% of the cases, where the rest of like 85 to 90% of the cases, they already have the facilities, proton therapy, or they already have the therapies which can actually treat that particular cancer tumor. But it's almost 10 to 12% of the cases, they have to require to go to our Hainan partner hospital to receive further care. The second part of your question is like how many, what's the percentage of cases which needs to come to US? Yes, there were close to 5 to 7, I would say, like for every 100 patients, there will be at least 5 to 7 patients who would be needing to come to US to receive further clinical trials. So we actually help those patients to enroll in one of the clinical trials, because the patient already established a rapport with the US oncologist. In most of the cases, the US oncologist himself recommends them and helps them enroll into one of the clinical trials, which is going on.
Maybe one last follow-up.
For sure.
How does a patient in China find you? Meaning, do they just have to get lucky and show up at a hospital or a clinician who happens to have a relationship with you, or is one of the payer relationships you have making this available? I'm just trying to think about how somebody there might actually realize that this is a service of which they could avail themselves.
For sure. So I would say we are kind of a McDonald's franchise, just to give a comparison. So all of these 25 hospitals which I mentioned, they're like the top 10 hospitals, PMCH 301. And within the hospital, we have our own consultation room where the hospital put their logo with our logo. So it clearly shows that if you actually want a US care or anything, like we have that particular service. And in most of the cases, it's not the patient, it's actually the physician within the hospital who recommends the patient that this is the care available, do you want to get it? So that's one way how we get our patients. It's through physician referral within the hospital. And the second way is obviously through the insurance. So it's for them, it's free, right? Like they just pay the annual premium of $5 or $10 or $15, and we cover 1 or 2 consults. There's a cap for all of this insurance, and that's how patients find to us. And we obviously do all other marketing and social outreach within their local social form of media. But most of our patients do come from either our hospital network or from the insurance.